Hey there. So as you can see, the bus is no longer with us. So this video is going to focus on me getting that engine out of that bus, and I ain't gonna lie, it was difficult. It fought me the whole way. Took longer than I expected, but here it's the end of July. Engine's out. It's at my house. Bus is gone. I'm just here with my magnet picking up all the crap, nuts and bolts that fell off the bus while I was taking it apart. I wasn't too diligent on getting too much video on the actual removal. I don't know how interesting people are going to find that anyways. The whole meaning of the series is actually getting the engine in the RV. But I did get some phone video and some still shots. But nonetheless, it's out. It's in my garage. I'm in the process of degreasing it, resealing it. The engine was leaking quite a bit, and it was leaking for quite a few years, just by the amount of oil that was on the underside of that bus. But yeah, but I'm sealing it up and making it look pretty. Fresh coat of paint. Not that anyone's gonna see it, but yeah, that'll be it for this video, and enjoy it. So here we are in the bus, and I ain't gonna lie, the stress level is pretty high right now. I've been looking for a place to rip apart the bus, looking around at places available to me and asking friends, and it's a big ask to just show up with a bus and say, hey, can I take my bus apart? But yeah, the stress level's high. So the bus has been sitting here at the storage facility since last November, I would say. And I'm going to attempt to go under the radar and dismantle it here, trying to be as discreet as possible, which sounds crazy, but I'm going to be discreet as possible. But yeah, the stress level, anxiety level, right up here. Feel like I'm getting over my head, but that's my mind going into overdrive. Like Kim says, I obsess about things. But regarding the engine and dimensions wise, I mean, I took some rough measurements, and it's first glance says it's gonna fit, and actually I'm thinking that there's going to be more room in the RV for the engine, simply because in this case, these frames are really, really robust on these buses. I suppose they have to be, of course. And the frame and transmission are actually sitting in between the frame rails, so the engine is actually nestled between the frame rails. And in the RV, it will not be that way. Obviously, the cross section of the frame on the RV isn't nearly as massive. I mean, we're talking the frame members of this bus are, let me put that down, like that. I'd say a good foot tall. Not so on the RV. So it's going to sit above the frame rails. The only thing that'll go below the frame rails is essentially the transmission, the bottom quarter of the transmission and oil pan, and the engine oil pan. But otherwise, it's going to be way more reasonable, and there'll be plenty of room for the turbocharger that hangs off the right side of the engine, and that will go underneath the passenger footboards. There's just a whole amount of room in that RV. Not so much here, and it's going to make it a challenge to remove. So, on with the project. I just need to bring this anxiety down. You can tell by my hair. It's all messy. Just need to bring that anxiety level down. And just cope with the fact that this is going to take longer than I expected, which is par for the course for me. I always underestimate times. But let's finish it up. Let's get this out of here before we go to jail. We're carving down to the heart of this beast. The front off. She's oily. It looks like I'm going to have to replace that front seal, which isn't too untypical at all. But yeah, we're getting closer. Big hole in the floor. Big hole in the floor. Pretty much got all the stuff disconnected from the right side of the engine here. Now I'm working on the left side. It's basically fuel supply, fuel return, wires to the starter and all that stuff. Some transmission linkage. Looks like it has a mechanical modulator. And I might be able to use that for the TPS when it comes to the electronic Allison. But I dropped the oil out of this AT545 here. Wow. It looked like engine oil. It's supposed to be red. It looked like engine oil, so that transmission is toast. And it just stunk. It was burnt. So, not the best transmission anyways. So that's worth scrap value. But we're getting there. Next, once I get all this stuff disconnected from the engine and transmission, I'll take the windshield out and cut with the Sawzall right there and right there, and it's gonna have this huge open area here for the engine hoist, or I have an offer for someone to use a skid steer, and he said it has forks on it, and he said it has more than enough capacity to pull this engine out. So we'll see. But as you can see, I'm making slow progress, and I was looking to integrate the original gauge cluster into the RV, and maybe even use the original wiring harness that was on this engine. But I've been looking up and down the internet for a wiring diagram for this particular year of TC 2000. And you can't find anything. I don't know. And I contacted Bluebird, and there's no response from them. And I don't blame them. It's ridiculous. Anyways, the guy who sold me the bus line that I purchased this bus from, I contacted him figuring they would have some sort of wiring diagram or something, and they do. So I'm gonna head over there on Monday and get some pictures of the wiring diagram. They don't want to give it up because I think they still have buses that they need it for, but the wiring diagram is pretty universal, and I'll use that wiring diagram to integrate the wiring harness for the engine into the RV, and to use that, be able to use the instrument cluster, because it looks simply like these the sensors on the engine. There's like, I don't know how many coolant sensors, and that's kind of why I need that wiring diagram. I want to know exactly what's what. I can guess, but it's just a guess. But anyways, those the wires that come out of the sensors, I believe, go directly to the instrument cluster. So it might not be the worst. But anyways, that's where we're at. I'm hoping the next video, this engine is not going to be in here anymore, but rather outside the bus. We'll see. Whew! Major milestone for me, at least I think it is. Got the engine out. Let me turn this around here. So there it is, separated from the bus. That's a big motor. Got all that turbocharged deliciousness there. That's ridiculous. Anyways, it's a little oily in front. That front main seal is leaking. Not unusual for these engines. But, yeah, it's free from the bus. Look at that big hole. That'll make it easier harvesting the wiring harness, which I'll try to use, at least the engine portion of it. And there's that piece of crap, Allison 545. I don't know if I said it before, but I dropped the oil out of it, and it was black. It stunk. It was burnt. So that thing is toast. But other than that, like I said, just a little oily. But holy crap, is it heavy. I'm figuring this is at least 1,200 pounds sitting here, if not more. Did have a little major goof up on the solenoid here, right there. Went to disconnect the wires, and that screw was pretty tight. Ended up busting the end of the solenoid. No big deal. No big deal at all. But yeah, so now I'm going to separate the transmission from the engine, because like I said, it's junk. But there's the flex plate inside that transmission that I'll be able to use on my 6-speed, and that's going to bolt right up to the same bell housing adapter. And I'll also build a cradle for it so I can work on this thing without having to set it on the ground. I don't know if that oil pan will support all that weight, probably not, but I do need to build a cradle. So, get the trans off, get that engine home. It's coming along. So I got the engine out, got separation on the transmission. Didn't go without a few faults. As you can see here, I got a couple busted off bolts. When I looked at them, I knew they were going to be difficult. The ones underneath were fine. You know, they've been soaking in oil for years now. So those came out really nice, but there were 3 that put up a fight. So I got 3 minor setbacks, no big deal. I'll get some heat on those, the rest, well, what's left of the bolts sticking out. Hopefully, if I get enough heat on it, they'll give up. But, yep. Getting there. Well, she's going away today, getting towed to strap. Goodbye. Taking its last trip. Off she goes. So I think I'm going to end the video here. I'll show you the progress that I made. Got the engine in the garage, just doing some final things on the engine, getting the seals in, new seals, it was leaking. But this is where it's at right now, sitting on the stand. My son Nick powder coated the valve covers, give it something pretty to look at. We wanted to do the turbo housing too, but there was no way that was coming off. Not without busting bolts, so I'm not into creating too much more work for myself. But anyways, There's a new power steering pump, and the only reason that I have a different power steering pump is because the original one that was on here runs at 2300 psi. I think that's a bit too much for the system that's on the RV. This one runs at just about 2000 psi. I think from what I've read on the internet, that, and the internet's always right, but the system should probably handle it. Some guys have said that they've used the 160 bar pump and it didn't leak, but I'm not going to risk it because it's going to be kind of a bear to change. Other things are the killer dowel pin. The famous killer dowel pin. I got that fix on there. The dowel pin that it's fixing maybe worked its way out 1/8 of an inch, so there was no threat of that coming out and effing up the engine. But pounded it home and put that little tab over it. It's kind of a nice little design because even if that bolt head comes loose, the cover will keep it from coming out and it will not get stuck in your engine. So kind of an interesting design. But that's where it sits. Now it's just a matter of getting the RV ready. It's going to be a challenge. I want to stick it in through the front because I did take the engine out, the original engine out through the door, driver's door, as you may remember, and that was tight. This engine is maybe narrower, but it is definitely longer than that 454. So I'd probably have to do some cutting on the floor to get it in through the driver's side door. So I'm going to attempt to stick it in through the front. I'll get this big beast up on ramps and get some altitude on it, because there's not a whole lot of room to get that engine hoist in there. As you can see now, I'm going to turn around. This thing is huge, and it's good and it's bad because it's really tall and I don't have a whole lot of room to get that hoist up in here, the jib, if you will. I could cut this out because it does go up the length of my hand there, so I could take some of this stuff off and cut a relief in that and maybe build it back up once it's done. But I still need to get the old transmission cross braces out, remove the power steering slash Hydro Boost brake pump off, and then there's this cross member here that I'll probably end up taking out. And there is some steering linkage in there that has to go under the transmission. But as far as the engine fitting in here, I think it's going to fit just fine. The oil pan will be behind this cross member, and there's plenty of room behind there, and the turbo will live essentially right under there. So the exhaust will go right out the side. It's going to be pretty cool. So that's where I'm at. And this is taking longer than I expected, but I'm not surprised at all. It's not surprising me. But yep, we'll just end it here, and the next video will consist of me getting that engine in here in the engine compartment and getting it all cribbed up, getting the driveline angles right, fabricating engine mounts. And that's it. So, thanks for watching.